On behalf of the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, and the Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS, at the National University of Singapore, I warmly welcome you to this afternoon's CII-ISAS CEO Roundtable on Diaspora in Business and Society. To start off the session, it's my pleasure to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of ISAS, to deliver his welcome remarks. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Sitara. Mr. Ajay Sriram, Mr. Majumdar, Saranjit, Danan, and my very dear old friends. I don't mean by age, but longevity which I have known them, Jamshed and Kumar, and of course all the others. You are most welcome, and ladies and gentlemen, you are making this event a little bigger than I anticipated. Thank you for being here. This is the first time that we have had this sort of session with CII. ISAS and CII have worked together on many other events. One of the iconic areas of cooperation has been on ISSD. This is a track 2, India-Singapore Strategic Dialogue. And this is co-promoted by CII and ISAS. CII looks after the Indian side, and we look after the Singapore side. And we have meetings alternatively in New Delhi or in Singapore. Apart from that, we have also cooperated with CII in organizing various events. I think some of you may remember that we had our former Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, visiting Delhi. We had a session which was jointly organized by CII and ourselves, chaired by Mr. Ratan Tata, and several other events that we have done. We have always had great respect for CII. Not many organizations do things as well as CII in India. So we always look at CII as an exemplary organization with a very good secretariat. This is not to praise Charanjit, but you know, he does a fantastic job, and he's got a very good, efficient secretariat. Now, going forward, this is the first time that we have had this type of dialogue, and I think it is a very good one, where we have a closed door without any reporters. I know that PTI is here, but we hope he doesn't at least misreport. But you will not get something. We have Times of India, yeah. But no reporting. I mean, this is a frank exchange of views. You can write a story about it, but not quote people. So I think we will have an active, lively discussion. Now, there are other areas that we can cooperate as we go forward. And yesterday, I had a very good discussion, morning coffee, with Mr. Banerjee. And I think one of the things that I have offered, I'm not sure how it will turn out. India has a Companies Act, I think it was in the 40s or something, amended in 2013. As a person who is invested and probably being involved in business in India, the amendments of 2013 to me are very onerous, very unfriendly to business, and that act needs to be looked at. And I'm told CII shares that view, unofficially at least, and I'm told that CII will be working on suggesting some amendments to the amendments or altering the act. And what I've suggested to Karanjit is that Singapore has been named as one of the most friendly, business-friendly countries for foreign investment. And therefore, our business practices may have some relevance for what you're doing in India. So I said, we don't have any real experts on corporate matters, but I've offered whatever little that we have, that we will do a comparison of what the laws are and what in the Singapore side, how do we do the same thing or what are our practices comparable, and you choose. You don't want it, doesn't matter. We are not making a report, we are not making a recommendation. We are just facilitating for CII, our friends, to look at both. If we can find anything at all from other Southeast Asian countries, we'll put it in as well, so that you can compare. Because the Prime Minister of India has repeatedly talked about best practices. And if CII is looking at it seriously, I know it will be taken seriously. And therefore, we would like to, I don't know whether it will help, but at least contribute to that discussion. So we have done that. It cannot be done overnight, it takes a bit of time. But I've already talked to two of my scholars who will be looking at this. And I think they will start working on it. Other possibilities are that as we go forward, we can look at organizing events both in Singapore and India. And Charindit also mentioned to me that next year, CII, unlike ISAS, which is a toddler, CII is a mature 120 years old. And they will be celebrating this next year with a number of events. So in this, we will cooperate. We will be partners to see how we can organize certain events in Singapore, certain events in India, bring speakers, bring politicians, scholars, whatever it is, and we will do that. And I think that's another event that we're going to do together. What does ISAS do? I think, as you all know, we are set up by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Trade and Industry within the university to add a certain dimension to existing relationship between Singapore and South Asia, particularly India. The foreign ministries of both countries, they interact and they're very friendly and that sort of thing. And I think there are business organizations that do various things. But there needs to be greater depth. What do? We create networks, whether it's with the business community, with the academia, with political leaders, and then we sort of trawl the information that comes up and then present it to the various stakeholders. In that way, I think we make the relationship a little broader, a little deeper, and probably bring about a better understanding of each other. We are more advanced in our dealings with India than with the other countries, but we have a fairly close relationship with Sri Lanka. We hope that we can develop similar ones with Bangladesh, with Pakistan, with Nepal. That's the other thing that we're going to do. I don't want to prolong my speech so that others don't get a chance. The format will be that Mr. Ajay Sriram will now say a few words, and then we open it to the House. When you ask questions, please identify yourself, and they will ask questions, comment, whatever. I think it is a 1 hour session. They're very busy people. They have got a whole lot of appointments lined up, but they spared us a little time, and for that I'm grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai, past presidents of CII, Kumar and Jamshed, President Designate Sumit, my colleagues from Delhi, ladies and gentlemen. Ambassador Pillai, thank you very much for arranging this get-together, this thought exchange occasion, and for getting such a distinguished crowd together so that we can exchange ideas and thoughts of what's happening in India. We really appreciate that. I think as far as India is concerned, just to give a little background, the last 6 months have seen dramatic change in India since the new government has come. The thinking has changed, the approach has changed, the pace of development has changed. And to really give a little depth into that, I'd like to go back a little further. Mr. Narendra Modi, I think for the first time in Indian memory at least, have we had a Prime Minister candidate selected and put up before the elections. You don't have that in India as a system. He came across and was chosen by his party as a Prime Minister candidate prior to the elections itself. So he campaigned on the plank of a Prime Minister candidate. I think the very important point to be noted by everyone is that for the first time one can remember, Mr. Modi's campaign talked of growth, development and good governance. I think in the past we've always had more free water and free electricity and that sort of an approach. But I think Mr. Modi's entire plan was growth, development and governance. And on this plank, he won an absolute majority in the lower house of parliament, in the Lok Sabha. I think one more very smart approach which he and his team adopted was understanding the demographics of India. Today we have 1.25 billion people in India. 65% of our population is below the age of 35. 52% of our population is below the age of 25. Between the age of 15 and 35, we have 425 million people. Between the age of 10 and 25, we have about 325 million people. In this elections, over 100 million first-time voters were there. In the 2019 elections, it is estimated there will be about over 130 million first-time voters in India. The median age is 27 years. I think this is the important point which Mr. Modi and his team understood. I think they also understood technology very well. Never before have we heard of a Prime Minister candidate having election rallies through a hologram. We actually had about 600 hologram-based speeches he made to a crowd in 3D as sessions. He understood India has today over 900 million cell phones. It is estimated by next year we will have over 300 million internet connections. Over 80% of our population has access to television. I think all these things are what really Mr. Modi and his team understood, and they raised the aspirations of the people. I think they raised and brought hope. I think they brought something to look for as a better life. I think this is where Mr. Modi and his team have done a phenomenal job. Now, that is part of it. I think the more important part now is delivery. And we really feel that he has come with a background of Gujarat governance. He's had 12 years as a chief minister. He's worked on certain areas which have helped the state and the people of the state. So he has got in running. There's no two ways of that. That's our feeling in industry, that the orientation is brought about, whether it's the PMO, whether it's the ministers, whether it's the bureaucrats. He has juggled around people and he is trying to move at a much faster pace than what was there in the past. We all also appreciate that ultimately the size of government, the size of the change required is so large, it will take a little time. But we do feel the direction is right. As we see it in CII, we feel this year India can get a GDP of between 5.5–6%. Next year we feel we should be able to get 6+, between 6–6.5%. And I think some of the reasons why we feel this is they are pushing very aggressively on getting clearances for held-up projects. It is estimated there are almost 6.5 lakh crore worth of projects held up, which they are pushing to get clearances from MOEF at the state level, etc. So I think that's one area they're pushing really hard. Inflation has come down, which is a positive for India again, the way it's going. The fiscal deficit is a challenge, but it is moderating. I think that's also a positive sign. And generally the business sentiment is positive. If we see now, in the last, I think, was 7-8 months, the stock market has gone up over 30%. It's moved up. I think they will feel a pulse. And I think the commitment of this government to reform is very strong. So we feel that change is happening, though it will take time, we also appreciate that. We do feel that this next budget, the coming budget in February, I think that will be important to give a clearer signal of what the government intends to do and how they want to go about it. So I think that's going to be important. The government is very keen to bring in investments, and they have moved for increasing the FDI limits in defense, and in discussions with the government, they are saying that although officially is 49%, but if someone does bring in some IPR or know-how or technology, they are willing to look at a high percentage also. They've increased it in e-commerce, they've increased it in the railways, and they're looking at various areas where FDI can come in. I think one of the factors which influences FDI is the issue of ease of doing business. That's a very important parameter. And frankly, all of us are quite amazed, and we must compliment the government of Singapore. Because on the World Bank scale of ease of doing business, Singapore stands #1, which is absolutely remarkable. India is in the 140s. So CII, in fact, had a dialogue with the Prime Minister when he was Chief Minister in April last year. And we have taken up a study and submitted that report to the government on ease of doing business. And we said, let's just look at the best practices in each state. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. And we feel that if we can get the best practices in each state and implement that, that itself should bring us in the 50s as far as the ease of doing business is concerned. And I may mention that in the last couple of months, Chandrajit, myself, and a couple of other people from CII, we made presentations on this to the PMO, to Mr. Nipendra Mishra and his team, to the ministries. So they are taking it up seriously. I think there is movement happening over there. So I think the government's seriousness to attract global investment is of a very high order, and they are moving on that quite actively. We feel that the direction taken by our Prime Minister, whether when he was in US or whether he was in Japan or whether he is in Australia or other foreign visits, I think he's making commitments which he knows he has to keep. And he's the sort of person, what we've seen of him, he's going to push his people really hard to get that. But if he's committed to something, the feeling is he will not take it lightly. And we are seeing the change in the sort of pace of working, the pace of decision making, the interest of making changes, the idea generation which the government wants. CII has recommended many areas for changes to the government. And they are looking at it seriously. They keep calling us, and the Chief and his team go fairly frequently to interact with the government on that. So I think there's a lot happening in India. It will take a little time to change a country like India. I think one more thing which has got a little more fillip and a little larger push is the issue of states and center. India today has 29 states and about 7-8 union territories. Frankly, I've said it before and I'm saying it again. I think we should look at India as states being mini Indias and within country India. I think each state is now competing with each other to attract investments, to increase the benefits and the well-being of their own people, and that's a great direction. The Prime Ministers and the government and the centre, we believe, want to percolate more powers to the states. So I think this little competitive environment developing is going to raise the entire level of efficiency across the board, which is a very positive sign. I think India's relationship with Singapore is very strong. There have been tremendous interaction, and Singapore investment in India and vice versa has been good. On the bilateral front, I understand Singapore is India's largest trade and investor partner from the ASEAN region, which is a very positive sign. We really appreciate that. Accounting for 1/3 of the overall trade with the ASEAN countries. In fact, Singapore has overtaken Mauritius as the leading FDI investor in India, which is a very positive sign again. So we in fact have had some very interesting meetings today. We're meeting some more people tomorrow, and we've had a great opportunity to meet you all and get a feedback of what we need to do also in India, what feedback we can give the government, what we can give the industry, and how we can take up things in a more aggressive manner. So we look forward to a dialogue, Ambassador, I really appreciate what you mentioned about the company law issue. That is a challenge, and we really appreciate a study that you would like to take up with the finance minister. Today, he is the minister directly responsible for the company law. There is no MS at the moment. There may be one, but we will be very happy to take it up with him. And the interactions. Next year is Singapore's 50 years and CII's 120 years. So let's try to do something together and carry that forward. And thank you once again for giving us an opportunity to share our thoughts and talk about India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sriram. In my problem, when you don't write down what you want to say, you miss some things. And a couple of things that I missed, let me just, before I go on to the second part. One is the involvement of ISAS in the organizing of Diaspora, South Asian Diaspora gathering. We have had 2 so far, and we will have one next year, 2015. Every 2 years we have. And here again we can cooperate with CII. The purpose of the Diaspora meeting is to try and bring the business people, the academia, from the various countries of South Asia together in a neutral territory where they don't feel threatened. If let's say Colombo was to have it, some of the others may not turn up. If Rawalpindi was to have it, the others won't turn up, and so on. Whereas Singapore, well, is neutral, harmless, so people come. You know? So we hope to create greater understanding between the countries of South Asia. The diaspora who are outside those countries, if they can be brought together so that they contribute. And at the last one, we had invited some World Bank officers, and they were very impressed. And they are now looking at some projects where South Asians can cross-invest. Let's say it's a project in Pakistan. Through their efforts and through their umbrella, under their umbrella, India may look at it. So in March, we have a team, I think, being organized by Dr. Chowdhury to go to Washington to discuss with World Bank how we are going to do this. This is a very important initiative, and it can bring great. The second one is unrelated to business. We are trying to organize next year a South Asian Writers' Conference. You know, there's so much of excellent literature being, emanating from Pakistan, from India, from Sri Lanka. Nobody bothers to sort of bring them together. We want to try and do that. Then in this collection, I want to tell you one small thing. We have a lot of South Asian workers in Singapore. I don't know whether 500,000 or something close to that. Now, nobody takes a second look at them. They're just there, But we found that they write fairly good poetry. Yeah, this is something nobody knows. A friend of mine who is in the University of Singapore, Mr. Kripal Singh, Professor Kripal Singh, had got these poems, translated them into English. I read the English version. They are heart-rending. Most of it is in Bengali, as is to be expected, and some in Tamil. So my colleague is trying to organize a poetry reading, both in the native language plus the translation. This, I think, puts another little string between Singapore and South Asia, between different South Asian cultures. So these are things that we do. Now with that, can I start the panel discussion? But before I do that, can each panelist just introduce himself in 2 lines? It's difficult for Indians, but can I start from that end?
Hi, Rajan Gawani. I'm part of a 3rd generation family business based out of Thailand and India. And at CII, I chair the National Committee on India at 75, which is a very ambitious vision for what India can be in 2022.
My name is Kumar. I'm a past president of CII. I'm with a group called Sanmar in Chennai, India, and we are in chemicals engineering and shipping.
I'm Jamshid Godrej, past president of CII, part of the Godrej family group.
Ajay Shriram, I'm privileged of being president of CII this year. Chairman, Senior Managing Director, BCM Shriram Limited. We have a chloro-vinyl portfolio and we have a large agri portfolio. These are two large businesses. We've got into value-add business of making UPVC windows and doors. Besides that, besides being involved with some associations nationally and internationally, I'm also privileged to chair the governing body of Shriram College of Commerce in Delhi. I'm also on the SOS Children's Village. I'm a trustee there and a trust patron of the Save the Children organization in Delhi.
Chandrajit Banerjee, work with the Confederation of Indian Industry based out of Delhi. Besides our many offices in India, 64, that is in all parts of the country, we have 8 overseas offices, one of which is in Singapore. Satish heads that, and this office is actually been there, one of our oldest overseas offices, and is responsible for the entire ASEAN region.
Thank you, Chandrajit. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shumat Mazumdar. I'm from Calcutta, a Bengali who's not a poet.
You will be.
We run a business in India, but we are headquartered in Calcutta. We're in the equipment, heavy equipment for construction, mining, and port handling equipment. And this year I'm the president designate of CII. In other words, I just understudied this year.
Well, my name is Sanjay Kirloskar. I'm from the Kirloskar family, which is in electromechanical engineering products. I'm also deputy chairman of the Western region for CII.
Thanks, Sanjay. My name is Kumar Guru. I'm the national chairman of Young Indians, which is an initiative of CII to engage with young leaders across the country. We have chapters across 34 cities in India and growing as we speak. In my day job, which is a bit sort of sparsely populated this year at least, I work with the Indian School of Business.
Thank you. Now it's open to the House.
Hi, Venkat from Poland. Poland is operating in about 6 million of business. Comment, question, and example we want to share one example. We all are very bullish about India with all the changes, whatever you mentioned. But the only thing is we are a bit worried about is exactly like what you said, center-state coordination, and more so politicians and bureaucrats coordination. I want to give 2 examples which will help you to reflect. One of the senior first secretary of Singapore, I come to the minister and traveled to India and came back. He went and said that I met one of the bureaucrat and minister. They want to put up a salination plant, okay, for a big amount. That guy is go and we could really put it up and get that done. But what is missing is how that water will get distributed, where the leakage will be about 50% of what you produce. The minister is not speaking.
It's
in
in
my
one.
I will.
We talked about it.
Yeah. My own example, the second example is Chandrababu Naidu was here very recently. He was very visionary in what he spoke about. I gave 2 proposals immediately on the same day. One from my company, one from a very leading education institution here to set up an office. Very good. I mean, when I wrote to them. But there are multi-bureaucrats are asking different kind of exchanges. I'm seeing the last 2 weeks. It's not coordinated like an IE in Singapore. So if we can have, induction is good, but for execution we need a body like IE, which can take lead and then facilitate the discussions and speedy reply, because we have multiple opportunities. Thank you.
Can we take a few and then you respond? Is that all right? Yeah. Maybe 2 or 3. Yeah.
My name is Vivek Chabra from Heineken. I was recently in India at the HT Summit, so I have a first-hand account of what's happening. Very positive, very encouraging. I think one of the questions that came up during the visit was that I think there are a lot of new bills planned for this current session, winter session in Parliament, 59 bills. But it's not very clear whether these bills would go through, especially things like insurance, land, GST, railway defense. So I think it almost, the precondition for being able to grow well is to be able to sort the issues of coal, GST, not so much GST, but coal and land and so on. So one is not clear on the lower house that BJP has the majority, but in the upper house the dynamics are a little different. And would these reforms go through? Because they almost seem like a precondition to achieving the growth and infrastructure development that we're looking at.
One more. Anyone?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Yusuf Wons. I'm with the Center for Creative Leadership. This question actually is around leadership and something you mentioned about Prime Minister Modi, very dynamic. But I think we're looking at a bit of a longer term perspective. I'd like to hear what the panel has to say in terms of what needs to be done to ensure that India's reforms and changes to have it ready to compete globally is not just based on his heroic leader persona, but put things into place for future generations, future even administrations to be able to carry on that work. So it's not sort of an event of India coming out or changing, but it's a long-term journey. So hopefully I can get your views on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start somewhere. I think the first point that you mentioned about the water issue, the desalination plant, we are aware of that. We talked about it today at lunch. In fact, we talked about it. And the second issue I think is related of the bureaucracy. I think one has to appreciate that the size of the bureaucracy is so big and the numbers are so big. It takes time. You know, one of the questions in the World Economic Forum, which was recently in Delhi, a question was asked of the FM. How are you going to change the mindset of the bureaucracy? And that is a big challenge. You know, I mean, we've all seen in our company, if you want to have a common goal and you want to change the mindset of so many people, it's a challenge. And here the numbers are multiples and tens of thousands. But I think there is a lot of pressure at the top. Definitely it won't happen 100% where one wants. But if we can just identify 5-7 important ones and sort of push it and get something going, I think we made some move. Second, I think what I was mentioning earlier of the issue of states. I think states competing with each other is a great thing to happen. We are seeing, you take states like Gujarat, of course, you take Rajasthan now, you take Madhya Pradesh now, other states. They're all trying to come out with resurgent Rajasthan, a vibrant Gujarat, and invest in Madhya Pradesh, and other states are looking at doing something. So I think that's part of the mindset change which has to happen. I think we should not forget at the same time that between 4-5 and 8-9, India did have 9% plus average GDP growth. It was in 2008 when the world markets also got affected and there was the international thing and all that. I think that led to a slippage which affected India too, and then we lost our track for a little while. So we are coming back to that. I think that is something which, it will take time, but we are confident in pockets and sectors, it will move faster. What we are suggesting, also frankly and openly, that as states are competing, someone wants to look at investments. Again, look at India as 29 mini Indias within country India. You know, I think that will be a quicker way and a more clearer way to look at where to invest. So I think that's one. Second is on the new bills you've asked. I think that's a fact. I think that is something which requires to be worked on. The government is leaning very, very consciously on it. They may not get everything through, but I think they're quite clear. If not now, the next session of Parliament, they will get. So they are pushing it very aggressively. The insurance bill, for instance, has been pushed back by 2 weeks because of some issues which have come. I think these people also know how to manage the upper house, lower house, and get things going if they want to bring about a change. So I think some of these will, some may not. But GST, for instance, is something which they're very keen to come to a consensus on. But that for India is so important. A World Bank study again indicated that the cost of doing business should come down by 4-5% if India truly becomes a common market, which today there are barriers between states. So I think that's another area. I think leadership of Mr. Narendra Modi, the question you asked, I don't see that as much of a problem because I think his approach is system change. Change in processes, changes in systems. But the reality is like in a company. If you have a new leader who comes after 5 years and does things differently, that's destiny. But I think as of now, I think the approach of this government and the leader, and Mr. Narendra Modi, I understand, every month he asks for a report from every ministry. He's a tough taskmaster. I think, frankly, we were discussing that I think corporates can learn a lot of how to run a company from a person like Mr. Modi with his approach. I think he's a tough taskmaster and he's a hands-on CEO. I mean, frankly, we were saying in Delhi again, we were saying that unfortunately he has no wife, no children, no family, no nothing. His only hobby is work. And as one of the ministers, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, made a statement 5 days back, he said he doesn't sleep and he doesn't let us sleep either. So that is the sort of situation which, there's another thing doing the rounds in Delhi, which is that, these days the golf course, Delhi Golf Club, in the morning it's empty because all bureaucrats are in the office, they're not at the golf course. So anyone can tee off much faster. So I think these are the sort of rounds. Chandrajit and I wanted to meet a bureaucrat the other day and he said, please come at 9:15 in the morning. So it's very quick. So I'm saying, I think the change is happening, but I think it's systemic and it will stay.
Anyone else?
I just want to add, somebody mentioned IE. IE is, of course, government. Similarly, I think the Commerce Ministry, the department of the ministry is the one responsible. We have dynamic minister and a dynamic secretary. And I think you will see implementation because they have been charged with this. So I think we will see it. But as President correctly said, it will take time. It's been, we've got to change mindsets. And I think the other issue is Modi has been a chief minister. I think he knows what needs to be done to make the country move forward. There's great hope in that area that he knows why states oppose certain issues. And so he'll work with the states. I think that's the key for most of us.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
No, just a couple of points actually. One is Mr. Kumar mentioned about him being state chief minister, but there we understand that there's going to be a sort of a model which would emerge sooner than later, is where there will be a coordination with the Prime Minister's office on any project or any issue. So you raise some with a particular ministry, it's a hub and spoke type of a model which will be connected to the ministry, say for instance Agriculture Ministry or to that matter. And that particular ministry's connection with the state governments and the state. So they are working towards a model of this kind, which will actually hasten and speed up implementation of any type of project. Talked about bills in the parliament. We had talked to one of the senior most ministers, actually two of them. We had recently had just a discussion and talked to them that you are facing headwinds in the upper house because you don't have majority there, and therefore probably you will not be able to carry forward. You don't want to reform the Companies Act or address the Companies Act because you will not get majority, and probably you'll do it through combined houses. So there is an issue there. They said that it's not so, and they are engaging with the opposition. That recently they also had a all-party meeting on the subject. So they are very proactively trying to engage the opposition and the other parties, basically to have a sort of a common understanding on which are the priorities. And they are doing it through engagement. I think that's a big program that they have, and they said that we are going to actually pursue this very aggressively. You talked about this heroic leadership perception. I just wanted to say that he actually himself addressed this in one of the meetings which I was attending. I think it was in Sydney. And he said that I'm really talking about small things. I'm talking about a Swachh Sauchalay. I'm talking about a clean India. So I'm really interested in small things, not the big bash rock star type of an image. That's really something which is God created. But I'm really more interested in small things. And I want to end by talking about poems, because you really said that Bengali and poems. When I was in New York, I attended a Diaspora meet. And it was a Diaspora evening actually, and just a small group like this, and it was a reception. And there was a gentleman who wanted a book released, and that book was a translation of poems in English by Narendra Modi from Gujarat, in Gujarati. So it was a Gujarat, and he read out two poems.
with us, Ravi Mantha.
That's right, Ravi Mantha. I was just about coming to that. And he read out two poems, and those two poems was read out in English translation, and those two poems were on love.
Okay.
Should I just add one more point?
Sure.
With your permission, sir. You know, you expressed concern about bureaucracy. In the corporate world, we always say, first of all, you've got to recognize there's a problem, only then you resolve the problem. I think that is something that is very clearly done. Modi recognizes this is a problem. And so far what Modi has demonstrated, Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated, is that if he has something in mind and he wants a resolution, he has a resolution up his sleeve and he implements it. So that is what we've seen so far. So I do believe that we will see the resolution to this down the road and not too far away.
Okay, Rahul, Dr. Rahul Mukherjee.
Hi.
Sorry, Mr. Kunal, you want to comment? Sorry.
Since you've given me an opportunity.
Sorry, yes, yes.
I just thought that I'd make a comment on the recent elections in Maharashtra.
Yes, please.
Where the BJP is running a minority government with someone that they fought against during the elections. So, you know, anything is possible in India if you really want to do it. And therefore, I would say that, you know, let's have a lot of optimism that people will get things done, the ones that are.
So that's the way the Indonesian government will always run from the time it's become democratic. They fight during the election, and after the election is over, they sit down and want people to get ministers from everywhere, and then the government runs for the next 5 years. So I think, you know, Maharashtra could be another model.
Okay, Dr. Rahul Mukherjee.
My question is that it's good to say that bureaucracy is a problem, but you know, I do a little bit of deep research on India, and I also find that bureaucrats sometimes play a very important role in changing the face of India, and that's neither studied by the academia nor is it reported in the press. Oftentimes, politicians are the problem, and sometimes politicians in cahoots with certain kinds of business are also a problem. I think we have to sort of face that. How worried are you about the problem of regulation, especially in the major infrastructure sectors? Because I'm sure that this affects both domestic and foreign investment. So for example, India doesn't even have ports comparable to Colombo. You had we had a telecom sector that was we are very proud of, which ran into a 2G scam, and recently the coal gate. So with the kind of majority that Mr. Modi has, is he likely to bring together his political power and his fairly obedient ministers to bear on making the regulatory structure more good for everybody? I mean, business that will make India grow. Yeah, that's my question.
Yes. I come to you, sir. Yes.
My name is Amitav Chatterjee. I have a boutique consulting company which we help businesses in the region to invest across the region. So I'm involved with a couple of businesses in India. And one of the things I'm relating two questions. You know, India is going on this thing of make in India, manufacturing. You can make in India two ways. You can get one big investment per state, or you can get 1,000 investments per state. And what I'm talking about is SME. I'm involved with a few SMEs in India. The biggest problem is they are starved for capital for growth. So my question is, how is the country going to address this issue of SME financing? To first just let the businesses that are already struggling to flourish, you know, and secondly, how are you going to address Make in India through allowing more SME flourishing, not just big investments or big company investments like that? That's it.
Okay, what? Mr. Ko is one of our top civil servants, but now he's a consultant to a company called Singbridge, Singapore's bridge with the outside world.
Thank you, Ambassador. Having worked in projects in India and China in the public and private sectors, my question is, from the perspective of individual corporate in India, individual companies in India, how do you see the opportunities of FDI from China? The role that Chinese companies could be cooperating with Indian companies. I say this because this is the second largest economy of the world, which is very near, and then potentially India will become the second largest in Asia. And the trend in China is across almost all sectors, services and manufacturing and what have you, pushing up, invest overseas. So, so my questions are, firstly, how do you see this from the corporate, from the individual Indian companies, the opportunity, the roles of a potential FDI from China? And secondly, do you see a meaningful role that Singapore companies can play in this triangular kind of configuration? Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can. 3 questions and. Sorry.
Okay, let me just talk on this as SME issue and manufacturing as part of it. Our problem with SMEs in India is that they have not really had a clear role. Some of them are involved in the supply chain of large companies. Very large number of them are on their own making and selling products, and many of them are exporting. So you've got bunches of these different SMEs. I think part of the problem with SMEs in India, which relates to the financing issue, etc., which you mentioned, is that they have never looked at competitiveness as their key driver, innovation and competitiveness as their key driver. They have always looked at tax breaks and getting some sort of salt somewhere or the other. And this has made them become very dependent on crutches. Now, I'm talking generally, so obviously there are plenty of examples to prove this wrong. But I think the point really is that we need to move away from the system that we've had on SMEs, which have been based on tax breaks, not paying excise duty, not paying sales tax, not paying, participating in. And I think when the GST comes in, it's going to take time. I think the earliest will be 16. But when GST comes in, it will force the entire small and medium-sized industry to be much more disciplined about innovation and about being more competitive. And I think this is their major problem. In the manufacturing sector, because I've been involved with them for so many years, what we have found is that when they become part of a cluster, they can become a part of an auto cluster, electrical cluster, furniture cluster, appliance cluster, whatever it is. When they become part of those clusters and really start working on issues of competitiveness, issues of innovation, issues of supply chain efficiency, I think they can excel. Obviously they have been started and run by people who have that entrepreneurial zeal, but they've got sucked into that unfortunate system of saying that we're totally dependent on tax breaks. So I think this is something that they have to look at. And I think that they have still not looked at the supply chain efficiency that is required to be part of a manufacturing system. So I think it's only then that they will really be able to make a huge difference. Now, of course, there are many, many small and medium-sized units which are very successful on their own. They make some product on their own, they sell it within India or they export it, and many of them are extremely successful in that way. So I think there are these different types of SMEs. So I think we really can't generalize too much about them, but they really need to get back to innovation. Now, when you talk to an SME entrepreneur, their first point always is there's so much bureaucratic interference, there are too many inspectors, that all my time, 90% of my time is going managing the system. I have no time for innovation, I have no time for competitiveness, I have no time for my customers, and that is correct. That is absolutely correct. That has been the case. And the Prime Minister has understood that point quite well. He's already passed a bunch of regulations. Parliament has actually passed some easing of labor laws, but much more will be done. Like for instance, the state of Rajasthan has gone much further than most other states in the recent past and said that no inspectors, no this, no that. So I think we need all that debureaucratization clearly. I mean, SMEs can only thrive if they really work on innovation and being really good at what they're doing and be a source of innovation. But I think that we're moving that way, but like everything else, these things do take time. So I thought I'd just address that issue. We had a major manufacturing summit in Bombay just a few days ago, which we do every year. We've done for the last 15 years. At this point, we keep on stressing, how do we make SMEs part of the system? And rather than say that they are not really a part of the system and they are more dependent on tax breaks and other benefits that they've got used to. And I think if we can get away from that and become really focused on innovation and competitiveness, the SME sector in India can become extremely competitive and will be the driver for growth, will be the driver for employment, will be the driver for exports and many other things.
Thank you, Jamshed. Yeah, just like some more comments.
Yeah, okay, I'll take the first question on whether Mr. Modi can make business in India grow and the role of bureaucracy. I think it's been talked about, but I think our understanding is that he's quite clear that the bureaucrats are the ones who would deliver. And I think he understands that the implementation and therefore, a large amount of force on making sure that, they do their job well. And he's really been able to put a lot of the right bureaucrats in the right ministries and places, and a lot of thought has gone in on allocation of that. And the role of politician, and I think this he had mentioned once in a closer discussion, was he says a minister administers. You see, so the process is like a large vision which really comes from what he stands for and what the country has actually given him a mandate for, with the minister who's administering that vision and the bureaucrat who is actually, implementing it. And one of the things that this government is doing very aggressively is to look at what are those best practices around the world for implementation. And with India at 75 from CII, we've been working very closely on seeing how that can be made possible. And there is a concept of the India Backbone Implementation Network, which really talks about how multiple stakeholders, across civil society, business, and government can actually work together to create a collaborative delivery environment. And some models from around the world, have been adopted. Actually, 2 weeks ago, the Malaysian Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister had a conversation, and it's up on the PMO website. The PIMANDU, the Performance Delivery Unit of the Malaysian Prime Minister, how do you really bring a 3,000-foot vision down to a 3-foot implementation plan is what he's looking at adopting into his office as well. So there's a lot of emphasis on delivery and execution, but like someone said, you can't expect results in 6 months. In 2 years' time, they would have probably a majority in the upper house as well. So maybe it would be much easier to move things. And the kind of mandate that this party has got, it seems that this government will be there for a while. So I think if we give it time, there is hope for India.
I think the question by Mr. Ko, Mr. Majumdar, you will answer?
Infrastructure in China.
No, Chinese.
I'll come to Chinese FDI. I just want to backtrack a little. India has been seeing a lot of good growth. We talked about 9%. And a lot of it came on the back of infrastructure build. There was huge highways, roads, power stations, idle power being put up. And new mining was supposed to start, didn't start, ran into a problem, someone talked about it. But I believe that is now getting sorted out. So we need the infrastructure to kick off. Now obviously for infrastructure, we need investments. And this is something where the Chinese can participate well because they have a lot of experience in infrastructure. Now the issue is, why did infrastructure run into a problem? We were working on a PPP model where the private firms are also investing and the government was also investing. But the issue that became a problem was the private contractors had to get the acquire the land for the road and acquire the environment clearance. And that is where we ran into a problem, because this is also state subject roads. Now what they've done is that the government has decided to move to an EPC contract. So for the EPC contract, they're going to require funds and they're going to attract funds. And that's an area that should interest China to invest in India on the infrastructure field. And the other thing that the government has done is these contracts, they make it bankable before they're awarded. In other words, 90% of all road clearances, environment clearances, everything are obtained only then a contract is issued. So hopefully this problem that we ran into won't happen. And this is an area definitely which should be of great interest to the Chinese.
Let me just add to that point of view. I think in terms of FDI, I think government doesn't make a difference between China and others. I think where India, we have invested in Egypt, for example, and in the US, our own group. Where we are facing issues is imports from China into India. And that is where a lot of problems come because of what we call dumping, which may not be true or may be true or something. That's where the issues are coming up in this area. As far as FDA is concerned, it's very level playing field. I don't think there's any objection to that. And to answer the other question, yes, Singapore can play a role because you have a great partnership with China. And I think one of the issues with CII always works is we want to work more with Chinese area. Because the Indian diaspora, and here one sitting next to me, is an outstanding success. And I think I believe in China and in Taiwan, a lot of diaspora is invested in this area. So we want more people coming here, and Gopi was also celebrated with the Padma Award. I think India goes to celebrate the diaspora in a big way. So I think we want more people like Gopi to come.
The thrust of the question was a little different. I think the acceptance of China FDI into India. And I think Kumar has answered it to say that there is no such problem and it can be done. Okay.
Just to ask one more question, most of the telecom players use Chinese
Auto sector, of course, but there is a more of imports rather than actually.
Yeah, exactly. So FDI is not an issue.
Well, when we did the Bangalore IT Park, one of the first big tenant there was Huawei.
Yeah.
Telecom equipment.
Yeah.
It was long ago. They discussed
still there.
Okay, next branch of questions, Mr. Rao. I'll come to you.
I'm Kiwi Rao, work with Tata. I think I'm 100% Singapore, both sides. I've also been on the CII core group last time. I'm tempted to ask a question because past leadership of CII, present leadership and the future leadership. And you talked about best practices. Something that I have experienced and seen in Singapore, both in the government and public, is that every few years, Singapore sort of brings upon itself to reinvent itself, to see the place, the government, the policy, the institutions, and the industry institutions have gone through a big change. And it's usually ahead of the curve. My question to you would be, with the changes that are happening and sweeping in India, as also the world, the context of business, the way the business is happening, may I have a sneak preview, if I could use that word, of any reinvention of CII in terms of its thematic, in terms of how it addresses itself. I see some great signs here with a young man sitting on there about the initiative. That's brilliant. One more here, two young men on both sides. I'm not talking only about age, but in terms of thematic, because I think from Singapore you could learn something, or we could take some examples of that.
Thank you. Okay, there's so many hands at the back. The young lady, one of our scholars from Korea.
Hello, I'm Sojin from ISAS. I'm working on Korean investment to India. And I guess, as all of you know, there are lots of problems in India when foreign investors enter the Indian market. And maybe I can raise some naughty questions to all of you. As a foreign investor, when you enter the other emerging market economies, like Indonesia or Malaysia, I guess you must have also faced some kind of problems in the process of land acquisition. for setting up your factories or any kind of red tape problems. So how did you tackle these kind of problems? Do you have any suggestions for foreign investors, who are coming into, Indian market? Right?
Rajiv.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rajiv Chaturvedi, work with ISAS. My question is to Mr. Banerjee. Is there any institutional mechanism to coordinate with the Ministry of External Affairs and PMO on economic foreign policy? How do you coordinate foreign policy issues? Thank you.
The lady there? Yes. I'll come to you after this batch.
My name is Suman. I ran an SME in India since 2000. I faced a lot of the problems, so much so that I was discouraged to actually have the headache of running a business in India. At the same time, it was the core strength of my business I ran. And I faced furthermore problems after I sold the business and I decided to do the transaction in India versus US. But one of my questions is that a lot of you are talking about policies which are beyond your influences as business executives, but the policies are made by the government. However, one of the questions I have is I am curious across the table to know what you are doing as individual business leaders to set an example, to make a difference in the working environment in India without waiting for the bureaucrats or the government to make changes. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. When I ran my business in India, every time I left my office, I saw nothing but broken roads, insecurity. I had employees who had to come in late at night. And I always wondered, and I was in a business park in Udyog Bihar when I was running my business, and I always wondered why we don't get together as business executives and make a difference. Why don't we take our employees and do things like companies like Salesforce does, which is 1% of our employee time to help make a contribution to the society or give 1% of our profit. So I'm curious to hear how you guys are making a difference. Long question.
Thank you. There are 4 questions. Who wants to start first? Maybe we start from the business school. Sure.
I think one of the questions was about how do you do business in India, right? I mean, this was the second question about.
I think one of the easiest way to sort of understand India is to actually, this is about problems and how all of them here have overcome their sort of problems in establishing operations in India. The easiest answer is to immerse yourself in India, and it's sort of easier said than done. But as a business school, this is our proposition to sort of employers that it's best to sort of get your people immersed within the country and then make them connect with local talent, and that's how you sort of help connect with the industry. But I want to sort of respond to a couple of other questions slightly differently, and this is also because given the topic is diaspora and business and society. I'm going to quote a friend of mine, Kingshuk Nag, who's the editor of Times of India, Hyderabad, who recently at a talk spoke of, he sees this current Modi's government as the creation of a new republic, or what he calls the second republic of India. I don't know how many of you sitting here in Singapore sort of echo the same views. I do think that there is a certain opportunity for all of us, and that comes back to your question as well, Suman, in terms of what is it that we do as individuals or as business owners to create this change.
Set an example.
Set an example. And I think there are enough examples that are out there. Sometimes as a nation we ridicule ourselves too much. I do think that we sort of go to the extent of sort of going on that route a little sooner than we should be. I do think there are fantastic examples of where corporations, individuals, foundations, communities have created change, positive impact in their own society. But when you look at this entire, given the sort of positive momentum that's in the country right now, nothing stops us from being that agents of change ourselves. It sounds very philosophical, but I do believe it's true. I do believe it's possible, and I do think that that's the right way for us to go. I also want to just take this thing to sort of talk about what Venkat you mentioned about Mr. Naidu's team. And one answer could that be that most bureaucrats in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana are currently not even sure which state they will ultimately belong to. So So there may be a certain urgency on their part to respond to your queries. So you may be seeing some confusion because it's a procedural issue. But I want to give you the example of Punjab, which actually set up what is called the Punjab Investment Promotion Bureau, appointed an IAS officer as the CEO of an investment bureau. I guess in some sense it's like the IE model, because they're actually vested the powers of a judicial, sort of revenue magistrate, factory inspector, all labor inspector. Every power has been vested with him, so that he can take those decisions. So it's an odd example, but Punjab doesn't come to Singapore yet, in terms of wanting to attract business. But perhaps there is a way to it. And also just taken time, Ambassador, I'll just sort of finish my last comment. Yusuf, you are the Center for Leadership. Perhaps you should do a case study on Modi's leadership. So that's probably something you can sort of think of doing something. Thank you.
On the CII part, actually, we have been an organization which is, Ambassador talked about 120 years old, but every time we have attempted and we tried to look ahead and bring in issues and areas of importance for the country, rather than just looking at from the narrow perspective of only business. So this entire youth wing which was brought into CII was something to look at how the youth looks at India. And this is, again, the Young Indians group within CII, Guru would have talked about it actually, is just not restricted to business. So you have entrepreneurs, you have professionals, you have politicians, you have media people, you have students. So a whole lot of them actually contributing as to the entire thought process, which again, another new organization within CII is the India at 75, which is really talking about what India could be in 2022 when it will be 75 years old. So, talking about this question of, how, in fact, in this group of India at 75, they talk about volunteering, which is how Indian corporates can actually donate their time on various issues. And we've started something called a volunteering week, and that is Indian corporates volunteering pro bono, giving time on issues of India to the society. So something which has actually been started again as a CII initiative under the India at 75. Our attempt has always been to look inwards, to say for instance, do things more through self-regulation rather than wait for regulation. Say, for instance, one issue that we recently addressed and still addressing is an issue of affirmative action. So we didn't want to wait for a government legislation on, say, reservations, but we saw to it that Indian industry shares best practices and adopts some of the best practices in terms of affirmative action. One can go on actually. So the idea is exactly what you said, to see how we can actually have some industry deliverables besides what we always say, government deliverables.
Any others? Just to answer the issue on the question of the Korean investment, I think it's the same as what I answered for China. I think all Indian investors go through, unfortunately, the same issue. So I think it's a mindset change. It came from the first set of questions. I think India, not the center as much as President talked about ease of doing business. I think that's where the changes need to come. I think the states, and that's an area where individual states, are 29 states and 6 union territories, need to learn and need to be more investor friendly. I think that's what
Also, somebody might like to answer the question on foreign policy that raised by a research scholar on the foreign policy. But
whether you had any kind of problem when you enter the other emerging market economies?
As I said, most of us have entered the scholars, knows about Indonesia and Vietnam. We have gone into Egypt. We face the same issues. These are cultural issues.
Right.
I think the country, each country has to learn, and that's why they're developing countries. Because they're in a stage of development where they don't. And we went through Egypt, and then we had the change in leadership, and we're still struggling in that area. Salaries have gone up 400%. But basically, when you go into a country, you go with your eyes open, and these are issues which come up.
I'll just add that, we got into Indonesia, we are there. Similarly Vietnam, similarly Philippines. I think one, a little better understanding what you're getting into. I think that's important to start. And second is some hand-holding by, let's say, one of these consultancy companies or someone else who knows the country. That helps. So I think that could be a similar thing for India too, because there is a bit of a maze everywhere. So I think a little bit of a hand-holding by some experts who know the country can really ease the process and the pain.
I think, if I could
yes.
answer that question as well. I mean, it's not only in developing countries that you face problems. We have a factory in United Kingdom, and 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they just removed the retirement age for private sector enterprises. Right? They've now told us that you should negotiate with people above 60, so that whenever they want to go, they can go. And so we have a problem that an 80-year-old can be working in our factory, and we'd still be liable for any safety issue just because he's old. So it's not only developing countries; these issues are there across the world as well.
Okay, one last question. The one gentleman at the back. Sorry, Surya, I'm going to cut off someone.
Thank you. Since this is about diaspora and business and society, I work for a firm called Dalberg, which is a bunch of ex-McKinsey, BCG, Bain consultants that decided to dedicate ourselves to business and society, which is we do projects which are strategy consulting, but only in projects where business can help society. We've created 14 offices around the world. Our largest is in Mumbai, but I have a question for you based on our 5-year experience in Mumbai as the captains of Indian industry, which is we find that our entire Mumbai office is on the plane serving countries in the Southeast Asia or serving social enterprises in India and so on. But we found that the appetite for business leaders to bring a structured approach, to bring the same rigor of strategy, of implementation, of execution, of partnerships and so on and so forth, that you do to your core businesses, the appetite of doing the same structured approach in your CSR, in your initiatives that are aimed at business and society, is actually very, very limited. And we find that we're able to use Indian talent, diaspora talent. Almost 80% of our office is diaspora. It's second and third generation Indians that want to serve India and have moved to India, but find themselves on a plane to go serve some other country. So my question is this: in the context of the new CSR law, what is your appetite to not just feel good by giving volunteering time, but to actually deliver results in society by using the same rigor and structured approach that you use for your businesses? What is your appetite for that? How do you view this CSR? And is this about feeling good, or is this about getting results just as you've gotten results in business?
Thank you. Last question. Who will?
So, I'm glad to hear. What's the name of your company?
Dalberg.
Dalberg.
D-A-L-B-E-R-G.
Well, so I think it's a good point you're making. The biggest benefit that the CSR funds in India will get is if they follow a structured approach. There's no doubt about that. I think that it's an evolving practice. Many organizations have looked strategically at what they should be doing, because I think part of the problem has been that there are so many things that need to be done in India that you can't address all of them. So each company should really look at what is it that they feel is core from their business point of view in terms of how they can contribute. And I think those who are doing that are seeing the benefit. And so I think it will be good for you to actually partner with CII in doing some workshops, etc., so that we can see how best to take this idea forward. In our own organization, we've developed a strategy called Good and Green, which basically is going to address many issues, but essentially only with that motto in front of you, which is Good and Green. And I think the skill training is something that we have seen from a business perspective is highly desirable for industry to really immerse themselves in deeply. And I believe only yesterday, some new apprenticeship act has been passed in Parliament, etc. So there are some structural issues that need to be worked out. But there is no doubt at all that every company needs to look very carefully at how best to spend its money. And actually the private sector has been quite engaged on CSR issues and things of how they can affect society and influence society for some time now. I think most companies, big and small, have been involved in it. I think the biggest, the area where actually the biggest gains will come will be from the public sector undertakings being much more strategic about their philanthropy and CSR. Because I think in the past, they have been very much directed by what their minister wants. So if it's building something in his village, that's very good. But they have not been able to spend any money actually. All the big oil companies, for instance, all the other big public sector undertakings making money, they need a lot of this. So I would strongly urge that you work with CII to work in this area. And not only CII, I mean, as you've seen here, we've got DL75, we've got YI, we've got so many other organizations within CII that can partner. But I think the point you made is very important. We need to take it forward.
I'll just add that I think as Jamshed rightly said, many companies are doing work in the CSR field. I think what happens is that corporates today in India are looking at doing work around their business operations. I've got 4 sugar factories, so I'll take up 10 villages around that. I've got a factory in Gujarat, so I'll take up something around that. It's not like a campaign like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that you will get a theme across the board. I think ours is more selective, it's more focused, and frankly speaking, to be honest, it is also to earn goodwill around where you are, which is part of the initiative. And the size of this now under the CSR bill, as per the finance ministry, is about 14,000 crores. Or 22, oh, my mistake, okay. 22,000 crores, even better. And you have to report it in a balance sheet. So you have to spend that money. So I think it will be a fill in large areas. I can tell you many companies are looking at advising. CII itself, we have, as Jamshed rightly said, we have a CII foundation, which is doing a lot of work in the direction. For many years, we've done work even in 2004-05 earthquake in Jammu Kashmir, in Baramulla, etc. We're doing Jammu Kashmir now, Badrinath, and we are taking a lot of projects under CSR for member companies. Because not everyone has the wherewithal to actually invest that money properly. So we are working on that, and it's really worth having a dialogue.
Yeah, actually, there is also another organization within CII called the Center for Sustainable Development, which actually consults companies on CSR. And there are several projects, actually, several private sector examples are there where we have been engaged with. So we'll be happy to actually connect you and work with you on various projects that we are involved in.
Fantastic. Can I just add something on CSR? This is my belief. I honestly believe that CSR should not be seen as charity. CSR has to make sense for your company. Yes. Either it is the future society, which is going to buy from you, or it is the environment where you're going to operate.
Or employment.
Or employment, or whatever. But it is to further your business, because you are spending stakeholder money. Yes. And you have no right to do it as charity. CSR has always got to be seen as something that you do for the business. And that is why, just like Ajay's company, whatever we do, is we supply equipment to the mining business. Mining destroys a lot of plants, trees and all that. So we will do all that. We will build schools in the mining areas. It makes sense for us. We will not do something that makes no sense for us. Because I have to report what I have done. So it is not charity, it has to make sense for your business.
I'll just add one line.
No, I think we have to call it.
Or we'll do it in the social interaction.
Sorry, it's 4 o'clock and this gentleman was supposed to go back at 3:30. So I want to thank them for staying. But I just want to make, this is the moderator's prerogative to say the last word, and that is, I'm a small-time practitioner in the Indian market. I'm an investor. I'm hands-on. I've started some companies some 20 years ago. And if you look at it on a month-to-month basis or year-to-year basis, India moves at a glacial pace, very slow, and you wonder, why am I here? But when I look back 20 years ago when I first entered, and what India today is, you see tremendous changes in the outlook of the people, in the education of the younger people, the competence of the system. You see great changes. When I first went there, I used to think that the people in CII were the greatest obstructionists for reforms. I'm sorry to say it, because they thrived on the license rights. So you go as an outsider, you don't know what to do with the license rights. But they have adapted themselves, they have become the crusaders of reform. And that is the great change you see in the business world. The second is the younger people. You take the youth, not the youth, but the young adults of India. They're tremendous people. I deal with a lot of bankers, small-time businessmen must deal with the bankers. I'm not on the same planet as these gentlemen. So I find the young adults of India are far superior to many others in other countries. I compare bankers in Singapore and India. In India, they find solutions. In Singapore, they usually focus on problems. So that's a big difference. And those of you who get put off by the negative publicity, see beyond it. I'm in the logistics industry, and I have compared my numbers with China, with Malaysia, with Singapore. Nowhere can I get as good a margin and a good bottom line, if you run it properly, as in India. This is a fact. This is in the logistics industry that I've been in. I'm saying this. So don't be put off by all the noise. The visual impact in India is very bad. First traffic light when you come out of the Bombay airport, you see a woman carrying a child with a matted hair, running nose. You wonder, why are you here? But if you go beyond that, then I think it's an India worth looking at, worth investing. Don't compare it with China. Don't compare it with anybody else. Take it for itself to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished panelists, for such an engaging, insightful session. This brings us to the end of the CII-ISAS Roundtable session. It's a pleasure having all of you here with us, and please join us and the panelists for a tea reception. Thank you. Have a good day again.